What if I told you that the freshest, liveliest minnow in your bucket is actually the one most likely to be ignored by a big, lethargic walleye? It sounds completely backward, I know. For years, we've been told that a frisky, active bait is the key to getting bit. But today, we are going to challenge that old-school thinking. We are exploring a counterintuitive strategy, using old, half-dead bait to trigger more strikes. By the end of this video, you will understand the predator science that most fishermen completely overlook, and it might just change how you fish on those tough days forever. So let me ask you this, and be honest. Do you always reach for the most active minnow in the bucket? Let me know why in the comments. Let's get into it. Let's set the scene. We've all had those brutally slow days on the water. You're marking fish, you know they're down there, but nothing you throw at them works. The core belief for most of us, passed down from generation to generation, is that fresher is always better. We spend good money on expensive aerated bait buckets, we change the water, we do everything possible to keep those minnows kicking hard. The logic seems sound. A lively bait creates more flash, more vibration, and it should get more attention. But here's the question we rarely ask. Does it get the right kind of attention from a fish that isn't in the mood to hunt? We're so focused on the bait, we forget to think like the fish. And that's the habit we're going to break today. First, let's get inside the head of a lethargic walleye. Picture a fish in cold water, maybe in the late fall or early spring. Its metabolism has slowed way down. It's not aggressively patrolling, looking for a meal to chase. Its entire existence is governed by one simple rule: conserve energy. Every single movement it makes is a calculated decision. It's not going to waste precious fuel chasing something that might get away. This isn't the same fish you catch in the summer that slams a fast-moving crankbait. This is a cold, calculating predator that's more of an opportunist than a hunter. Understanding this low-energy mindset is the absolute foundation for everything we're about to discuss. It's not about being a lazy fish, it's about being a smart, efficient survivor. This brings us to a concept I call predator economics. Every predator, from a lion on the savannah to a walleye at the bottom of a lake, unconsciously does this math. The calculation is energy spent versus energy gained. A healthy, darting, super-active minnow represents a high-energy chase. The walleye has to move fast, burn calories, and there's a chance the minnow could escape. For a fish in energy-saver mode, that's often a bad deal. It might watch that lively minnow go right by, deciding the potential reward isn't worth the guaranteed cost. This isn't a conscious thought, of course, but a deep-seated instinct. When we present a bait that's too active, we are essentially presenting a bad business proposition to the very fish we want to catch. Now let's look at the other side of that coin, a struggling, half-dead minnow. What signal does that send? It sends the clearest signal in the entire natural world. I am an easy meal. There is zero risk for the walleye. There will be no chase. The energy cost to capture this meal is almost nothing. The energy spent versus energy gained calculation is a massive win for the predator. It's the equivalent of a free lunch delivered right to your door. This easy meal trigger can override a fish's lack of hunger. Even if it's not actively feeding, the opportunity for a zero-effort calorie infusion is often too good for its predatory instincts to pass up. This is the trigger we are trying to activate. So what about the idea of a reaction strike? We hear that term all the time. The idea is that a fast-moving bait zips by and the fish strikes out of pure reflex, without thinking. And that is absolutely true. Sometimes. It works great for active, aggressive fish. But for a lethargic walleye, that same fast-moving, lively bait can trigger the opposite reaction: avoidance. Think about it. If you're tired and resting, the last thing you want is something zipping around your face. For a fish in a neutral or negative mood, that frantic action can be more of an annoyance than a temptation. It represents a level of energy that the fish simply doesn't want to engage with. We're mistaking an aggressive presentation for a universally effective one. Let's think about the visual cues. What does a walleye actually see down there? A healthy minnow moves with purpose. It darts, It stops, it's alert and aware, its movements are sharp and predictable. Now picture a dying minnow. It doesn't dart, it wobbles. It doesn't swim, it spirals slowly towards the bottom. It has moments of twitching, followed by stillness. This slow, erratic, uncontrolled movement is a universal sign of weakness and vulnerability. It's a visual dinner bell. Any experienced predator sees that pattern and immediately recognizes a creature that is helpless and cannot escape. It's a completely different visual signature, and for a lazy fish, it's a far more appealing one. The scent trail is another critical piece of the puzzle that we often ignore. A healthy, lively minnow that's just stressed from being on a hook releases certain pheromones into the water. It's a scent of alarm, but an injured, dying minnow releases something entirely different. It's leaking bodily fluids. It's releasing the chemical scent of injury and death. This scent is one of the most powerful attractants in the aquatic world. It doesn't signal danger like a stress pheromone might. Instead, it signals guaranteed food here. For a walleye, which has a very keen sense of smell, following that scent trail leads them to a meal they know they can capture without a fight. You're ringing the dinner bell with both sight and smell. And let's not forget about sound, or more accurately, vibration. A walleye's lateral line is incredibly sensitive, picking up tiny vibrations in the water. A healthy, fleeing baitfish creates a sharp, high-frequency vibration. It's the sound of a chase. A dying minnow, on the other hand, produces a much more subtle, low-frequency flutter. Think of those last, involuntary muscle twitches and the soft sound of it spiraling through the water column. This sound signature is another key indicator of vulnerability. It's not the alarming sound of a healthy creature trying to escape. It's the quiet, enticing sound of an opportunity. It draws the walleye in to investigate rather than startling it into action. Think about this as a real-world scenario at the bait shop or on your boat. You look into your bait bucket, your eyes are naturally drawn to the sprinters, the ones zipping around looking like perfect specimens. That's the one you instinctively grab, right? Meanwhile, there are a few at the bottom, just kind of listlessly hanging there. One might be upside down, but its gills are still moving. Those are the ones we usually ignore, or worse, toss out. But from this point forward, I want you to see them differently. Those aren't your duds. On a tough day, those are your secret weapons. They are the perfectly prepared, pre-weakened offerings that a lethargic walleye is actually looking for. So how do you prepare this lazy bait? The goal isn't to kill it. You want that last spark of life. Sometimes the bait bucket does the work for you after a few hours on the lake, but you can speed up the process. Don't put all your minnows in a fancy aerated bucket. Keep a small, separate container with just water. The lower oxygen will naturally make them more lethargic. Another trick is to gently squeeze the minnow's tail between your thumb and forefinger. Don't crush it, just enough to stun it slightly and impair its swimming ability. This will give you that perfect, slow, wobbling action when you put it in the water. You're essentially creating the perfect, easy meal on demand. Rigging this lazy minnow properly is just as important as selecting it. If you use a complex rig that imparts a lot of action, you're defeating the whole purpose. Simplicity is key. A plain, light jig head is often the best choice. Hook the minnow lightly through the lips or below the dorsal fin so you don't kill it outright. The goal is to let the minnow itself provide all the action. You don't want your rod movements to overpower the subtle, natural twitches of the dying bait. The presentation should be all about realism, and in this case, realism means a creature that is barely moving on its own. And that leads directly to presentation. This is not the time for aggressive snap jigging. You have to match your presentation to the bait. You are trying to mimic a creature that is at the end of its rope. The best method is often a slow, methodical drag across the bottom. Cast out, let it hit the bottom, and then just slowly pull it a few feet. Then pause, let it sit there for 10, 20, even 30 seconds. That pause is when the magic happens. The minnow is just sitting there, twitching feebly. Any nearby walleye sees this, senses this, and views it as the easiest possible meal. Patience is your greatest tool when using this technique. This lazy bait technique absolutely shines when you're using a slip bobber. Think about it. A slip bobber allows you to suspend your bait at a very specific depth, right in the strike zone. A lively minnow will swim around frantically, often tangling your line or moving in an unnatural way, but a lethargic minnow is perfect. It just hangs there, suspended in place, giving off those subtle twitches and that slow, mesmerizing tail kick. It can't swim away. It can't hide. It's just a sitting duck. For a walleye suspended off the bottom, seeing this helpless little meal just hanging in the water column is often an irresistible trigger. It's the ultimate ambush opportunity. Let's be very specific about when this strategy works best. This is primarily a cold water technique. It excels in the early spring, right after the ice melts, and in the late fall, as the water temperatures plummet. It's also a killer tactic for ice fishing. Why? Because these are the times when the walleye's metabolism is at its absolute lowest. They are in that peak energy conservation mode we talked about. They are physically less capable of and less willing to engage in a high-speed chase. So when the water gets cold and the bite gets tough, that's your cue to slow down your presentation and power down your bait. Match the mood of the fish. We need to talk about overcoming our own habits because this is a real mental hurdle. It just feels wrong to intentionally choose what looks like the worst minnow in the bucket. For our entire fishing lives, we've been conditioned to believe lively equals good and lethargic equals bad. It takes a conscious effort to fight that instinct. You have to trust the process and the logic behind it. The first few times you try it, you might feel like you're wasting your time, but when you get that first solid thump on a bait that you would have thrown away an hour earlier, a light bulb will go on. You have to unlearn what you have learned. I remember this one day, years ago, on a cold November morning. The bite was absolutely dead. I was using the liveliest shiners I could find and getting nothing. A little ways down the bank, this old-timer was just hammering fish, one after another. I finally went over and asked him what he was using. He showed me his bait bucket, and I swear, it looked like a minnow graveyard. They were all pale, barely moving. He just chuckled and said, "Why would a tired old fish want to chase a racehorse?" That one sentence completely changed my perspective on live bait fishing. It was a simple truth that I had been overlooking my entire life. Now let's be crystal clear about something. This is not a universal silver bullet rule. This is not me telling you to throw out all your lively minnows forever. Of course not. If you're on a hot summer bite and the walleye are active, aggressive, and feeding heavily, then yes, a lively, frantic minnow can be the absolute best thing to use. That flash and commotion can call them in from a distance and trigger those aggressive strikes we all love. The lazy bait strategy is a specific tool for a specific problem. The problem is a tough, slow, cold water bite when the fish are in a negative or neutral mood. A great angler has many tools in their toolbox. And while we're focused on walleye, remember that this principle applies to many other predator species. Think about a big largemouth bass on a cold front day tucked into thick cover. It's not going to chase a fast-moving spinnerbait, but a slow-falling, twitching senko that looks like a dying worm. That's an easy meal. Think about a northern pike lurking in the weeds. A healthy perch might be too much work, but one that's injured and struggling is an easy target. The fundamental principle of predator economics is universal. All predators, given the choice, will opt for the path of least resistance to get their next meal. This isn't just fisherman's wisdom. The science of predation backs it all up. Wildlife biologists have studied predatory behavior for decades, and one pattern is consistent across almost all species. Predators are hardwired to target the weak, the sick, and the injured members of a group. Why? It's a survival mechanism. Attacking a weak target ensures a higher probability of a successful hunt. It minimizes the risk of injury to the predator itself, and it guarantees the most efficient use of energy. So when we intentionally use a weakened bait, we aren't just trying a random trick. we are directly tapping into millions of years of evolutionary programming. Here is a crucial distinction to make. We are talking about using lazy or dying bait, not dead bait. There is a world of difference. A completely dead minnow that's been sitting for a while will become stiff with rigor mortis. It has zero movement. It might catch a fish occasionally, purely on scent, but it's not ideal. What we want is that last little bit of life. We want that subtle, involuntary muscle twitch. We want that slow, natural tail kick. We want that gentle, spiraling fall through the water. That tiny spark of life is the final, critical piece of the trigger. It's what makes the bait look authentically helpless, not just like a chunk of inanimate food. So, here is your action plan for your very next fishing trip. Don't throw out those weak-looking minnows. Cherish them. When the bite gets tough, and you know it will, rig one of those lethargic minnows on a simple jig head. Find a promising spot, cast it out and let it sink to the bottom. Then just be patient. Use that slow drag and pause retrieve we talked about. Resist the urge to constantly jig it and impart action. Trust the bait. Trust the science. Let that struggling minnow do what it was born to do. Look like the easiest, most irresistible meal that any self-respecting walleye has ever seen. You might be shocked at the results. So, let's bring it all home. The single biggest takeaway today is that our deeply ingrained belief about live bait might be sabotaging us on the toughest days. We've been so focused on lively and active that we've completely ignored the powerful psychology of the predator. The real aha moment, the turning point, is when you stop thinking like a fisherman and start thinking like a lethargic walleye. It's all about energy conservation. That struggling, half-dead minnow isn't a second-rate bait. It's a perfectly engineered, low-energy, guaranteed meal. Embracing this changes how you look at your bait bucket and gives you a powerful new weapon for those brutally slow days. Thank you so much for watching. If this video challenged your thinking or gave you a new idea to try, do me a favor and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed for more tips that go against the grain. Now for my final question, what is the most counterintuitive fishing tip that has ever worked for you? Drop it in the comments below. I can't wait to read them.